Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for the last day of hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin, November 30th, 2019. Happy Saturday to you. Here's a look at the tropical Atlantic, and of course nothing going on. We end the season with 18 named storms. We had 6 hurricanes form, which is about right where we should be in a given year, and 3 major hurricanes, which is also pretty much right on average. The ACE score for the year was 130. That is the amount of energy that was output from the various tropical cyclones this year, with Dorian being the high scorer of the season, of course, becoming a strong Category 5. Lorenzo was also a high scorer. Umberto was. And most recently, Sebastian was in there as well. But the rest of the group, Barry, Imelda, Nestor, Olga, and others, those were much lower scoring ACE producers, accumulated cyclone energy, because they were much shorter lived tropical storms. They were not very intense. And so the 18 named storms is a little bit misleading, because hurricane-wise, we were pretty much an average season. 6 hurricanes, 3 major hurricanes, but 2 of them became Category 5, Dorian and Lorenzo, and that is quite unusual. So nothing out there today, of course, nothing in the Eastern Pacific, Central Pacific, nice and quiet as you would expect. Satellite image here of a good deal of the Western Hemisphere. Down in the tropics, all is nice and quiet. Strong upper-level winds cutting across the Caribbean as you'd expect. A weak little disturbance in the Pacific. Strong upper-level winds cutting across the Gulf of Mexico. This will do it outside of any anomalies that we see pop up in the Atlantic Basin over the next several months. Hurricane season is 6 months on, 6 months off. It won't surprise me in the least if we get something developing out here in the off-season months. Sometimes we get that, especially with a cold air, low-pressure system that comes down over the relatively warm Atlantic, and especially if the Atlantic's running warmer than normal. Bottom line, don't be surprised if we see a named storm sometime between now and next June, but that'll probably be in the subtropics and no big deal. Instead, our focus is going to be on a couple things. In the longer term, it'll be these larger mid-latitude storm systems that you see here. That's where my focus shifts in the off-season, especially more and more, thanks to the support that I get on Patreon, allowing me to extend my reach beyond just hurricanes. And we'll be watching these winter storms types events, winter storm events, going forward. Nothing that I can get out there for right now, but it's early. I mean, heck, it's just the last day of November. The peak time of the winter season and the winter storm season is usually latter January through the month of February into early March. What we will be watching, though, in the shorter term, with very keen interest, is this typhoon out here in the Western Pacific, Typhoon Kamiri, headed towards the Philippines. And this is the satellite imagery of it, the infrared, colorized infrared as we look at it, at the West Pacific area. Kind of late in the year, you would think, but their typhoon season out there can go pretty much any time. Lots of deep, warm water out there. A couple things that we note on the satellite imagery. First, no distinct eye is yet visible on the satellite imagery just yet. Fairly well-established outflow with the system. Kind of choked a little bit on the eastern side here, that flat edge. It's not a symmetrical, perfectly fanning out look to the upper levels, so it seems to still be struggling just a little bit. The forecast from the global models indicating that it should get stronger and better organized. It still has a couple of days to go. Now, I am very interested in this for a number of reasons, one of which is the fact that this guy, our good friend and colleague and one of our patrons, he helped me in Hurricanes Florence and Michael and Dorian this year. This is Brent. Brent is in the Philippines, taking HurricaneTrack technology with him. I'm not there. I'm here in North Carolina helping Brent. In fact, there's a whole bunch of us helping him on our HurricaneTrack Insider Chat. And here's just a few things that Brent was talking about this morning. I'll let this play, and then I will resume my discussion.
The plan is to be hitting the road about 5:30
20-something hours on a plane.
Trip and a lot more to go. Here to intercept Typhoon Kamuri, and with the help of Mark and all of you, hopefully I can produce some good videos for everyone to see. So quickly, I just wanted to show what gear I had brought with me. It's all kind of packed up. I've got just the bags open. I've got a tight pack job, so don't want to unpack everything. So in a second here. Alright, down here. So I've got 2 Pelican cases. This one's just packed with a lot of stuff right now. These are for 2 GoPro units that I can mount remotely anywhere and get probably 24 plus hours of video. Got a bunch of extra gear, straps, some of my camera equipment also. Got locks, zip tie, straps, silica, keep everything dry. And that's all the space I've got for my clothes. A couple pairs of jeans and t-shirts, and that's everything there. Here's my backpack. I've also got my Mavic 2 drone. Some lenses for my camera. My Nikon DSLR. GoPros in here. Also got tripod equipment. Got some Filipino pesos. And that's it. 2 bags, both carried on, and a lot of gear.
So also he brought the Kestrel drops with him. I know he forgot to mention that, but he's got these pressure sensors. And so the idea is that Brent will, with our aid, myself and our group here on HurricaneTrack.com, our subscriber site, the insider site, a lot of smart people there, and collectively we're going to help him get to the right spot and deploy this equipment ahead of time. Did I say equipment? Equipment ahead of time, kind of like we do for hurricanes. So we're literally taking what we do for hurricanes in the Atlantic. He flew it all over there, leaving from U.S. Virgin Islands. That's where Brent is from. Flew to JFK yesterday, then to Tokyo, and he arrived in Manila in the Philippines, and Manila is right there. He did so several hours ago, and it's about 13 hours ahead of North Carolina time. So in North Carolina right now, it's about 4:37 p.m. or 3:37. Sorry, maybe I have jet lag, and so it's about We'll call it 4:40 a.m. Sunday in the Philippines. You understand? So it's about 13 hours ahead. Anyway, Brent is there. This is the Typhoon. The HurricaneTrack way of doing things is now into Typhoon intercepting. We know that James Reynolds, if he's not already there, he will be. Josh Morgerman will be there. Other people have done this. This is not some new thing. We know that, but it's new for us. And our way and our style, everybody has their own knack of doing things, and they are popular or not, depending on what they do, and we get that. So we're bringing our brand and my direction, both from a filmmaking perspective. I want to capture this, we say on film, but it's all digital these days, but you get the idea. I want to capture this both from a cinematic documentation perspective, as well as a way to show what's going on with the impacts, but also very, very important to capture the science. Now, unfortunately, we can't haul over a bunch of anemometers. Maybe one day we can figure out a way to do that. And I don't mean the handheld Kestrels. Those are nice, but I'm talking about the ones that we use, that we mount, that can record wind of 200 miles per hour. That's what I want. We'll get there. You got to learn to crawl before you can walk and run. And this will be our first event. So Brent will test the ability to do all of this in a typhoon situation in an unknown part of the world to us, using a lot of guidance and technology to get him there. So here's the Typhoon, getting stronger, better organized perhaps, and we'll look at the track here. This is from the Japanese Meteorological Agency, the JMA, and generally speaking a west-northwest track into the northern part of the Philippines. Manila is located right up here. Now, there's a few things going on in and around Manila, which is a very big population center. You have a big soccer, I think it's called the SEA. There's a soccer, I'll call it a festival, whatever you want to call it, going on. There's also a Rotary, for those of you that know Rotary clubs. I guess there's a convention there, lots of Rotarians there. And not to mention that Manila is a big city anyway. So the track, the official track for the center, and remember, this is for the center of the eye, or the center of the typhoon, brings it to the south of Manila. But as you can see on the satellite here, let's get rid of this one. The typhoon is not just a dot, just like we talk about with hurricanes. So with Manila being right here, the center could go to the south, and Manila would still have tremendous amount of rainfall, the possibility of mudslides. All of that holds true over here in the Philippines, just like it does in the Atlantic Basin. So there's the JMA forecast. Here's the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, their forecast, and this is part of the Navy has their whole team of meteorologists looking at this, of course, because of the U.S. command out there, the ships, etc., the naval groups. So it's different than simple U.S.-based hurricane forecasting, where we get a discussion and there's tweets about it and everybody's on top of it. Out here, it seems like it's a little bit larger gaps in between the information, and you just don't get as much. We don't have recon out there, so it's more of a challenge. So we go by the forecasts here from the official sources, JMA or Joint Typhoon Warning Center, or we can look at the global models, which we'll do so in just a moment. So this brings it in, again, to the north-central part of the Philippines, the core going just south of Manila as well. So a little bit of geography for you. Brent landed and is in the Philippines, of course, but in the Manila region. In just a little while, he's going to take he's got a driver secured, and the driver is going to take him down here. And from there, we will all work very closely on our Patreon group, our HurricaneTrack Insider supporters, again, made up of a lot of very smart people, and we will work collectively. You have crowdfunding, well, we're going to crowdsource the best way to get Brent into position, probably on the southern part of this island right here. I mean, he'd have the whole island, presumably. It's just a matter of getting him there. But this lagoon here, this bay, or this gulf, is, in fact, if I zoom in, I think the name of it will pop up. This gulf right in here is interesting because if the core of the typhoon comes in here moving on a west-northwest trajectory, the storm surge at the head of this gulf could be pretty substantial. And so it's a very tough call for Brent, for James Reynolds, for Josh Morgerman, anybody else that's going, quote, chasing, which is a misnomer. It's an intercept. You don't chase unless you left too late. But Brent's going to go down here, and then he's got the road network to either get him over to one of these ports where he can get over to the island via ferry across this gulf, or do we go ahead and just try to position him somewhere around here? That's going to be the challenge. It's going to push a tremendous surge up in here, perhaps, especially if the core comes more to the south and that counterclockwise flow is able to pile up the water very effectively this way. Or we want him over here on the east side. I don't know. We still have some time to work this out. What he will be doing is deploying hopefully both of his unmanned camera systems, the technology that I developed over the last 14, 15 years using off-the-shelf technology. It's just taking regular stuff and modifying it to suit our needs. And Brent has 2 of those systems with him that'll run for more than 20 hours, and that's what we want. So he could potentially set something up, just as an example, right here, leave it, go to the island, set something up here, and then go over here to get the landfall. That's something we could consider as an option. We can use these pieces of technology, both from the unmanned cameras and the pressure sensors. So maybe he could have a pressure sensor here, put a P for pressure, and the camera system, the GoPro, as well as another pressure sensor, if he wanted to, and the GoPro here, while he maybe sits up here right on the beach. Maybe the eye goes right over. I don't know. That's just a scenario. That's how we do what we do when we plan for hurricanes, and apparently the same will hold true here for typhoons. And again, for folks up here to the north and west in Manila, big city, lots of people, where that core comes in, how big the eye is, etc., the radius of maximum winds, the onshore flow up here. You do have mountains over here that'll block some of that. But the flooding from the heavy rainfall, that could be a huge issue. And Brent, everybody else there needs to take that into consideration. Once we get closer, we'll start dialing into radar, local radar out of the Philippines. And for that, we will rely on a variety of sources as well, including Brian McNulty and his awesome radar loops that he does working for the University of Miami. All right, we'll deal with that when the time comes. Upper ocean heat content is tremendous there. We'll look at that first. All of these yellows to the east of the Philippines here, you see Josh Morgerman talk about it, James Reynolds talk about it all the time, that across the Philippine Sea, typhoons really undergo some of the most rapid intensification rates in the world. They become beasts in this area, there's no doubt. So plenty of upper ocean heat content, and the depth of that, I rarely get to show this. You might be looking and going, oh, well, what are those temperatures? Well, this is not the actual temperature. This is a really neat chart showing the depth of the 26 degrees Celsius isotherm. See that right there on the legend? So 26 Celsius is around 80 Fahrenheit, and the ocean heat content measurement is because of how deep that upper ocean heat content is in the ocean. How far below the surface is it still 80 degrees or higher? And in this case, the yellows here, all to the east of the Philippines and the typhoon's path, these yellows and darker yellows and oranges, greater than 100 meters, and in some cases 125 meters deep of 26 degrees Celsius water or warmer. That is why the upper ocean heat content is so great in this area. There is enormous amounts of deep, warm water for this typhoon to tap into. And that being said, we look at the global models and you see what they're depicting. This is the GFS, and right now it shows that this is the 500 millibar level and the surface pressure, and it shows it at a respectable air pressure. But over time, as it moves along generally to the west there, it becomes much more organized and concentrated. You see all those isobars in there, those lines of equal pressure really getting tight, and it's moving to the south of that ridge. That's that reddish color that you see sticking over the top of it, keeping it forced on that west to west-northwest track, and it approaches the Philippines sometime on Monday is what it looks like, and if I can get this to cooperate with me, and then crossing over well to the south of Manila with the core there. So you see that it kind of jogs along, bounces around, but generally speaking, a west to west-northwest track, and very, very close. I'm going to pull this image out separately. In fact, I screwed up. Let me go back. It's okay. Let's go to the landfall right there. Pull this image out. So if we zoom in on it, if this will let me, if Mark can figure it out, that island, which I don't know its name, I can't pronounce it, real close to right in here. So very, very close to the island there that we're going to try to get him on, the or vicinity. And Manila is tucked away right up here off of Manila Bay. So we'll see. But it does intensify in the GFS south of that ridge. We're still far enough out that we got plenty of time for him to get into position, and then we worry about the micromanagement of details from there in terms of where to go. The Euro, every 24 hours we get plots, and it's about the same kind of thing. Again, that island that we're trying to get him to is right there. And if we look at the plot here from the Euro, south of that ridge, a little bit more of a ridge to its north there than the GFS has. And so it's a pretty straight shot to the west. So the Euro has a little bit more ridging, almost like a thumb ridge, as we call it. It sticks over the top like a thumb, you know, like your thumb over the top of whatever, holding something down, and in this case it holds the typhoon down from gaining more latitude. This is only 2 to 3 days away overall, and I don't think this is going to change dramatically. And as such, going back to the Google Maps here, it is my best guess, and certainly it makes sense with what we see from Joint Typhoon Warning Center and the JMA, that the core would pass somewhere along this track, something like that. It can move more south, more north. It could be much more of a straight west track, which is about 270. We'll see. So the trick for Brent and everybody else chasing this, I hate that term, but whatever, is to get from where they are now. Brent's going to get down here to Naga, if that's how you say it, or Naga, whatever, and eventually I'll learn all of my pronunciations, and we're going to try to get him to this island or somewhere in vicinity. All right? So stay tuned for that. It'll be an interesting time of it. The Euro with that stronger ridge, more of a west track. We'll see. Real quick on lower 48 weather, big-time winter storm, blizzard conditions over the plains. We've talked about this the last few days. Winter storm watches, etc., ice storm warnings for the northeast interior. Not a big coastal storm, so these waves and flooding impacts for New England will not be much at all, especially with the tide cycle, the astronomical cycle like it is. Another coastal storm off the Pacific coming in. That'll bring more mountain snows to the Sierra. Storm warnings for the coast of California. Much needed precip down there, that's for sure. Out that way, down there, out there, whatever. You'll take it no matter what I call it. You need the precipitation, the snowpack. And then this yellow, that's a tornado watch for portions of the deep south as the very, very active winter pattern, even though it's not technically winter yet. This is the pattern we're looking at over the lower 48. We'll focus on this more and more as hurricane season and this typhoon comes to an end, etc. Real quick before I sign off, I know I've been going pretty long today, but there's a lot to cover. This coming Wednesday for our patrons on Patreon, I will be dropping the first episode of my new podcast called Stories from the Hurricane Highway. You're going to want to tune into that if you're a current patron. If you're interested in what we're doing on Patreon, it's not just the crowdfunding. Yes, money is what makes the world go round, but it's also this collective effort for furthering my education, your education, all of us together. We work together on a lot of things. Believe me, it's a community, almost like a co-op, and it is amazing. Consider joining up and being a part of this effort. It's not a subscription as much as it is a co-op of like-minded people, and as part of the reward, if you will, plus I just enjoy doing it, I am dropping a podcast starting on Wednesday, December 4th, once per week from December through May, a new episode of Stories from the Hurricane Highway, an audio podcast. I think you're really going to like it, and it's exclusively available only on Patreon. So, hey, even just for $1 a month, you can take advantage of that. All right, well, that is it from me for now. I'll be working closely with my group of colleagues and all of us, again, putting our collective minds together. More details to emerge tomorrow, not only for impacts for Filipinos and, what they could expect, but also Brent. We want to keep him safe, and we want to get him in the right place to capture this from a documentation perspective and the meteorological perspective, and that'll be my job. All right? Have a great rest of your Saturday. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.